Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode in Diabetes Management on a Budget. And we're talking about nutrition. Last two episodes, we talked about two important carbohydrates, the sugars and the starches. And the third episode today, we're going to talk about fiber. Remember, in the episode initially, when we talked about nutrition, we said that there are three main food groups. There's the protein, fat, and carbohydrates. When it comes to carbohydrates, there is the bad, the ugly, and the good, as it obviously relates to diabetes. So the good, the bad, and the ugly are the fiber and starch and sugar. The good is the fiber, the bad is the starch, and the ugly is sugar. Now, we talked about sugar, we talked about starch, and if you haven't watched those episodes, please go back and watch them now, because with that, what I'm saying today will make a lot more sense. But today we're going to resume talking about fiber. So what is fiber? Fiber is a non-absorbable form of carbohydrates. So it stays in your stomach, in your gastrointestinal tract for longer, and it's what we call bulk formative, which means that it actually absorbs water and kind of it grows in size. And that's one of the main ways why fiber makes you feel full. So if you eat a high fiber content meal and drink water with that, you're going to feel full, because the fiber, a lot of that fiber is not absorbed into your system, but stays in your gastrointestinal tract and absorbs the water, grows in size, stretches out, and makes you feel really full. That's a good thing. And by the way, it is very helpful for the health of your gastrointestinal tract and your colon. There is evidence that it can cut back on the incidence or happening of colon cancer. So its benefits are a lot, and not just for diabetes management, but for other health concerns as well, or health issues as well. Okay, so where do we find fiber in nutrition? Well, we find it in two main sources, the vegetables and the fruit. Now, we have to be careful here, because fruit has more than just fiber. Fruit has a natural form of sugar, and it's definitely better as a source of sugar than an artificial sugar as a dessert or a candy bar, cookies or cake, or a regular soda, which we agreed was the absolute worst form of sugar that you could get. But anyway, just I'm saying that to explain to you that fruit is not safe when it comes to diabetes. It's not like you could have as much fruit as you want and still your diabetes would be under control. You have to be mindful when it comes to fruit of what you're doing, when you're doing it, and how you're doing it. We're going to talk about all this today. As our custom has been over the last few times, I begin the episode by telling you about some of the myths for diabetes and myths about nutrition, and some of the common miscommunications that happen between healthcare professionals, including dietitians, and between patients with diabetes. So two big miscommunications that I want to talk about today are, number one, the idea that what you need to do is to eat more fruit. And the second one is the idea that in order to lose weight or to control your blood sugar, you need to eat 6 small meals per day. Those two advices end up backfiring big time, and I'm going to explain why. But let's first talk about the two main components, the two main parts of that fiber category, which are vegetables and fruit. Let's talk about vegetables first. Vegetables are great. They are very healthy for you. They have vitamins, minerals, a lot of water, which you need and have also the fiber as a form of carbohydrate. A lot of them have also protein, and they may have healthy types of fat. So all in all, very healthy thing to have. And I encourage everybody to eat more vegetables. So it turns out when your mom was telling you to eat more vegetables, that she was right. And we're going to talk about what kind of vegetables. So remember that not all vegetables are created equal. There are vegetables that have a lot more starch content to them. It doesn't make them bad. It's just you have to be mindful of that. If you're getting one option of starch, you need to make sure that you're not, by mistake, getting also other forms of starch in the form of some starchy vegetables. We call them vinos, such as the sweet peas or beans or lentils, that are making you get more starch than you intended to get. So what are the true vegetables and the best vegetables? These are, the green leafy vegetables, the lettuce, the spinach, kale, Brussels sprouts, also the zucchini, the squash, cauliflower, and broccoli, and so on. Green beans, by the way, are a vegetable, a true vegetable, not a starchy vegetable. So there is a difference here between green beans and between lima beans, kidney beans, red beans, black beans. All the beans are basically starchy vegetables, except the green beans, which are actual vegetables. So they have much less in terms of carbohydrates. They have much less content of carbohydrates and starch than the other members of the beans family. This is just one thing to remember. All right, so vegetables are great whether in a meal, as we said last time. They need to occupy half the plate or more. You can go for seconds if you get hungry. If you are hungry in between meals and you need to snack, we'll talk more about snacking in a short while. But just now, if you want to snack or need to snack in between meals, there is nothing better to snack on than vegetables. Ways that you could get that and that wouldn't raise your blood sugar or make you hungrier down the line would be something as a fresh vegetables, let's say cucumbers or celery sticks or baby carrots, and that you could, to make them more interesting, if you will, you could dip them in peanut butter or a dressing that is not unhealthy. A good dressing. I talked about dressing last time. I'm not going to talk about it more this episode, but those are some of the things that you could do in between meals, and they would satisfy the hunger and make you feel full and very good for weight management. But at the same time, they are not going to raise your blood sugar. Now, in opposition to the vegetables, where we said, yeah, they are good. You can have them as much as you want. There is basically no limit that I would have to say, stop, or you're getting too much salad, or you're getting too many Brussels sprouts. That's not going to be the case. But when it comes to fruit, on the other hand, you have to be careful, because as I said, fruit not only have fiber, but they also have sugar in them. So when you're getting fruit, whether it be in the form of a dessert or, or some other form, you need to be mindful of several things. Number one is, what kind of fruit are you getting? Because not all fruit is created equal, and not all forms of fruit are created equal. So for example, getting fruit in a can, let's say pineapple can, or some of those cups that have tangerine stored in a juice, well, that's not a good form of fruit. That's not a fresh fruit, and it has a lot of sugar. In the process of preserving them, they put in a juice or a very sugary liquid that has a very high content of glucose, of sugar, that's going to drive the blood sugar high for anybody who has diabetes. So those forms of fruit are not good for you and wouldn't be my recommendation, versus a fresh fruit, an apple or a pear or an orange, that would be a much better form of getting the fruit. But another thing that a mistake that a lot of people do when choosing the form of fruit they choose is to get preserved fruit, raisins, for example, or dried apricots or some other form of fruit. Now, what that does is that it dehydrates the fruit. So how do you get raisins out of grapes, for example, is by removing the water portion. But that water portion, which is a big volume of the fruit, comes from the water naturally. It's necessary, is needed, because it helps you stay full. When you are removing that water portion and a significant amount of the fiber portion, you're going to shrink the size of the fruit. So it becomes much easier to get a big number, a big volume of fruit and a much higher sugar content than you would otherwise with a fresh fruit. For example, just think of how much easier it is to get in a handful of raisins, for example, 100 raisins, but you would not normally eat 100 grapes. It just becomes, you would think that's just way too much. And you're right, it is. But if you get 50 raisins or even 100 raisins, you may not think of it much, but it is a tremendous amount of sugar that you are putting in your body, and doesn't have the advantage of the high water content, so you're not realizing how much you're consuming. That is why if you go for fruit, you need to be mindful of the form of fruit, especially that it would be a fresh fruit. The second part to it is, among fruits, are all fruits the same? Let's say we agreed on fresh fruit. Are all fresh fruits the same? The answer is no. Some fresh fruits have much higher sugar content and a higher glycemic index that we talked about in the previous episodes than other fruits do. So, and it's not always intuitive. So you might not be able to basically find out just by thinking about which ones taste the sweeter. But I'll tell you, the absolute highest in terms of glycemic index, the fruits that have the highest glycemic index and that hit the bloodstream the fastest when it comes to diabetes, the highest one is melons, followed by grapes and bananas. So melons, such as cantaloupe, such as watermelon, they have a very high glycemic index, so they hit the bloodstream very quickly. A lot of people think of the melons, especially watermelon in the summer, as mainly water. I mean, it even has the word water in the name, but it's not really just water. It has a lot of sugar. The grapes also have high glucose content. Dates have high glucose content, and bananas have a high carbohydrate amount and high carbohydrate content. I see some of the common mistakes that people do with their nutrition with diabetes is, cereal. When we discussed cereal last time, is they get cereal in a bowl, so not a cup. So the bowl of cereal has a lot more than a cup of cereal, and maybe 2 cups or more of cereal, in addition to milk, which has carbohydrates, and then they put a banana or half a banana on it. That easily can exceed 100 to 120 grams of carbohydrates in just that breakfast. And the main one of the big issues with it, not just that it would make the sugar number rise, but that it isn't even filling, because the person will feel hungry in an hour or 2 hours because it didn't really have any form of protein or healthy fat. Yeah, the milk has some protein, some healthy fat, but not nearly enough to slow down the absorption of these carbohydrates, of this tremendous amount of carbohydrates. And so it has a high glycemic index. And I'll teach you another word today. Is called glycemic load. It's the amount of carbohydrates present in any density of food that you consume. It has a high glycemic index, high glycemic load, and it spikes the sugar, but it doesn't fill you. So 2 hours later, you're hungry for more, even though your sugar is high. So that's one of the bad ways to use carbohydrates, to use fruit. So we talked about fruit and the options and how we can make sure that we get it in the right form and the right choice. But also, number 3 is, when do you get the fruit? Because when to get the fruit is a very important aspect of this. A lot of people make the mistake of snacking on fruit. And there is a word that I want you to memorize and keep in your mind, which is that fruit is the best dessert, but it's the worst snack. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking fruit is healthy, period. So I can have fruit as a snack in between the meals, and they end up having markedly elevated glucose values, especially with the summer when there is a lot more fruit available and people tend to snack on melons, on grapes, and lo and behold, the blood sugar goes very high. It's a common issue that we see. Okay, so what I told you about what are the less healthy fruits, but what's the best fruit? What are the better fruits? Well, from the standpoint of nutrition in terms of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, berries are probably the best. Okay, but I understand that berries, especially like blueberry, raspberries, blackberries, I understand that you have 2 problems with them. Number 1 is they're not very sweet. And number 2 is that they can be expensive. They can be more expensive than the other fruit. So what comes next? What's in between the berries and the high sugary fruit, such as the melons and the grapes and bananas? Well, there is, in the middle, you would get things like apples and pears and plums, nectarines and peaches and so on. So they are not as bad as the highest sugar fruit, but they are not probably as good as the berries. However, they are perfectly acceptable as a dessert, not as a snack. You should not be snacking on fruit if you have diabetes. And that takes me back to the initial miscommunication or myth that we talked about, which a lot of people innocently, a lot of healthcare professionals innocently say to patients, but they end up backfiring big time, which is eat more fruit. Now, when you hear eat more of X, what do you think? Well, you think, okay, well, I'm going to add this thing that they are asking me to eat more to my diet, meaning that my diet will stay the same, but I'm just going to add fruit to my diet. So instead of having cereal just with, the cereal and milk, I'm going to add a banana to my cereal to make it more healthy. Or I'm going to snack on grapes through the day or watermelon through the day because fruit is healthy and the doctor told me eat more fruit. So eat more fruit. I'm adding more fruit. So innocently, that advice that was meant to be for good ended up for worse for patients. What the idea or the better recommendation is to switch your dessert to fruit. What I mean by that is instead of having a piece of pie or cookies after a meal or a cake or ice cream, it's better to have fresh fruit after the meal, right after the meal. Now, not as a snack. Why do I say not as a snack? Because you need to put limits on it. If you allow fruit to be a part of your snacking, you're just going to go through the kitchen, especially if you're at home, you're going to go through the kitchen, well, get some grapes, then come back, eat some melons, just have this with your other snack. You can get a couple of peaches or something like this. And you think you're doing something good, but that is not good, because once you don't set the limit for your snacking and you're eating fruit as a snack, the amount of sugar in it adds up quickly and causes the blood sugar to rise high. And it's not good from weight management perspective either. We haven't talked about weight, and I'll talk about weight in future episodes, but just know that snacking on fruit is not a good idea. Instead, what I would recommend is you can snack on vegetables. There are some other options to snack on, which we will discuss in the episode about protein and about fat. But for now, no, don't snack on fruit, please, and use fruit instead of a dessert, instead of an artificial sugar. Use fruit, fresh fruit, not preserved, not in a juice box or whatnot. Use fresh fruit as your dessert after the meal, and keep it to one portion. Obviously, it's not a good idea to get a large number of grapes or a large number of whatever fruit you're getting after the meal. Even if you're doing it as a dessert rather than a snack, it's still not good to have a tremendous amount. It's always going to be better than a dessert with artificial sugar, but you have to be mindful of the quantity that you are using. Now, that takes us to the issues with finances, because we started this whole project to explain to people how to eat healthy on a budget and how to manage the diabetes on a budget in the first place. In future episodes, we'll even talk about medications and insulin, how to get your health care for less expenses. But now I want to focus on eating healthy nutrition on a budget. How does that pertain to vegetables and fruit? Now, as I said in the previous episodes, that doesn't mean that you have to eat organic. I know, and I know probably better than many of the people who advocate organic food, why organic food would be healthier in general than non-organic food. But technically and fiscally, it's not possible a lot of times for I would say the majority of people to eat constantly organic food, because they just don't have the means. And if you have the means today, I'm sorry to tell you, you will not be able to cope with those prices in the near future, because as I said, I think things are going to get much worse. Unfortunately, I don't want them to get worse, but it's what I think. So how are you going to afford this and have the vegetables? Now, get non-organic food, but you can get it, but still go for the vegetables. Get the pre-packaged salads. We talked about this last time. You can get to snack in between meals. If you have to snack, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. You can get some of the cucumbers, of the celery sticks, of the baby carrots even, that you could use together with a light dressing, light ranch, for instance, something of that nature, to use as a snack, much healthier for you and much less expensive as well than some of the other snacks. Now, another thing that you could talk when we talk about fruit, yes, fruit can be expensive, but you don't have to buy the most expensive fruit. And that doesn't mean that you have to go for watermelon and melons and grapes either. I mean, you could have a non-expensive form of oranges or apples or pears that you could use as your dessert, or even blueberries. A lot of people are starting to grow their own blueberries in the yard, if they have a yard, if they have means to do that. If they don't have a yard, they cannot grow their fruit or their blueberries. what they could do is you can buy them, and remember that you could always make them a bit more interesting to give them a sweet taste. One of the problems that a lot of people will say, well, it doesn't really give me a sweet taste. I understand what you're saying. I want to be healthy, but I'm used to the taste of ice cream, of candy bars. They have a lot of sugar, and yes, they do. So how can I do to transition to something that tastes in comparison as bland as blueberries, for example? Well, one of the ways that you could do it is to transition is basically you can get the blueberries and add some stevia on them. If you can add some almonds or something of that nature, mix them up. It's going to give you a very nice sweet taste. You could put them in the fridge, and that's a good dessert that you could have that is much, much healthier for you than either the ice cream or the cookies or the bars, chocolate bars, or things of that nature. The other thing that you could do is when you could mix the actual fresh fruit with some flavored Greek yogurt. And that mix can be also tasty while giving you a little bit more of that sugar taste, but at the same time, not as bad as some of the artificial sugars we talked about. So let me end up this episode by answering one of the first questions that we asked is, why is that idea of miscommunication, of myth of adding fruit to your meal and of eating 6 small meals per day, why is it bad and doesn't work? Well, we talked about the part about adding more fruit, why that is bad, because it just simply reinforces in your brain the idea that you need to, in addition to what you're already doing, which some of it might not be good, you're adding to that the fruit as a sugar form. And we said that it's much better to substitute, to switch from your sugary dessert to a fresh fruit. But the second part about those snacks and 6 meals per day, that a lot of times, innocently, you will hear that from dietitians, you'll hear that from doctors. It's a very common misconception, very common myth among even healthcare professionals. They will say, well, in order to lose weight, to regulate your sugar, you need to eat 6 small meals a day. Now, why are they doing that? Is there any basis for this? Well, the basis is that in a completely controlled model, if you got somebody and you were entirely responsible for what they ate and drank, and you designed 3 meals and 3 snacks that are perfectly healthy, that they would be eating them through the day, and made sure that is under 1,800 calories per day or under 1,500 calories per day, and you give it to them, well, there is no doubt that they're going to be healthier for it. But that doesn't happen in real life. When you tell somebody that eat 6 small meals per day, what they hear is, I'm going to eat 6 times a day. That if you are eating 3 times a day, then the solution to your problem is to eat more. That's what they hear. I know, as a healthcare professional, dear healthcare professional, I know you're not saying that, but that's what they hear. Okay, and I don't blame them, because that's what anybody reasonably would understand is, okay, well, I'm going to eat more. Well, the part about small is relative. So if I'm eating, instead of a full plate of rice, 3/4 of a plate of rice, well, that's small for me. That's going to be less than a full plate of rice. So I'm cutting back. I'm doing what you're asking, doctor, right? So obviously that doesn't work well, because when you add more food and more chances to make a mistake with your diet, you're just going to have a higher blood sugar, not a lower blood sugar. And also for those who try to lose weight, they're going to gain weight. They're not going to lose weight if they are eating 6 times a day of, especially of the wrong things, because those 3 small, quote unquote, small meals are going to be things usually people think of when they think of snacks, like pita chips and popcorn and crackers and cookies and things of that nature. That's what they will start to snack more on, or even fruit, as we discussed. And they are going to snack more on that, and as a result, it's going to be much worse for them than they were before eating simply 3 meals a day. So that doesn't really work as a healthcare advice, and actually backfires big time. I hope this episode has been helpful to clarify some of the things about fiber and some of the things about snacks. And I'll see you in the coming episode. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. Until next time, have a good day.